My family cut me off for marrying wrong. Now they want back in after meeting his parents. My father delivered the ultimatum 3 weeks before my wedding. He called at 9 p.m. on a Thursday while I was addressing invitations at my kitchen table, and his voice had that cold, controlled tone he used when he'd already made a decision and wanted me to know it was final. "If you marry this man, you are no longer part of this family," he said. No preamble, no explanation, just the declarative sentence that ended 26 years of being his daughter. I asked him why, and he laughed, but there was no humor in the sound, just contempt. "You know exactly why, Simone. We raised you better than this. We gave you every opportunity, sent you to the best schools, introduced you to the right people, and you chose to throw it all away for someone who works with his hands like common labor, someone whose family probably can't even afford to contribute to the wedding. It's embarrassing." The word hung in the air between us like poison. Marcus and I had met 18 months earlier at a community garden project where I'd been volunteering as part of my nonprofit work. He was installing an irrigation system, his hands covered in dirt, explaining to a group of elderly Vietnamese gardeners how to maintain the water lines. He spoke to them with patience and respect, never once talking down or simplifying beyond what was necessary. When he smiled, his whole face transformed. I'd dated investment bankers and lawyers before, men my parents approved of. None of them had ever looked at anyone the way Marcus looked at those gardeners, like their knowledge and experience mattered as much as his technical skills. My mother got on the phone next. Her approach was different, softer, but somehow more cutting. "Sweetheart, your father and I just want what's best for you. You're making an emotional decision without thinking about your future. What happens when the novelty wears off and you're stuck with someone who can't provide the lifestyle you're accustomed to? What happens when you have children and realize you've trapped yourself in mediocrity?" She used the word mediocrity like it was a diagnosis, a disease I'd contracted that she desperately wanted to cure. I told them Marcus owned his own contracting business with 12 employees and steady contracts, that he'd put himself through technical school while supporting his younger sister after their mother died, that he was kind and thoughtful and made me happier than I'd been in years. My father's response was immediate and brutal. "Then you've made your choice. Don't expect us at the wedding. Don't expect any financial support. Don't expect to be included in family events or to have access to your trust fund. You are choosing him over us, so live with that consequence." The call ended, and I sat at my kitchen table surrounded by half-addressed invitations, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the pen. Marcus came home from a job site an hour later and found me still sitting there in the dark. He didn't ask what happened, just pulled me into his arms and let me cry until there was nothing left. When I finally told him what my father had said, his jaw tightened, but his voice stayed steady. "We don't need them. We'll build our own family, better than the one you came from." My sister Valerie called the next morning. She was careful, like she was negotiating a hostage situation. "Dad's serious, Simone. He's already changed his will. Mom's devastated, but she won't go against him. If you just postpone the wedding, give it a few more months, maybe they'll calm down and we can figure something out." I asked her why I should have to postpone my wedding to placate our parents' snobbery. She sighed like I was being deliberately difficult. "Because they're family. Because Dad controls everything. Because you're making this harder than it needs to be." The next 3 weeks were a study in isolation. My parents returned the wedding invitation unopened. My brother Jeffrey stopped answering my calls and texts. My aunts and uncles, who'd been warm and present my whole life, suddenly became too busy to meet for coffee. Only my cousin Adrienne reached out, and that was to tell me she'd been advised not to attend the wedding if she wanted to remain in good standing with the family. She cried when she said it, but she didn't come. Marcus's family responded differently when they heard what had happened. His father, Ramon, a quiet man who ran a small restaurant supply business, showed up at our apartment with his wife Teresa carrying containers of homemade food. "Family who treats you like this isn't family," Ramon said in his careful English, his accent thick, but his meaning clear. "You have us now. We take care of our own." Teresa hugged me, and I broke down again, overwhelmed by the simple acceptance from people who barely knew me. The wedding happened on a Saturday afternoon in a small botanical garden. 53 people attended, none of them related to me by blood. Marcus's extended family filled 2/3 of the chairs. His sister Camilla was my maid of honor because I no longer had a sister willing to stand beside me. His cousin DJ walked me down the aisle because my father had made it clear he considered that honor revoked. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence felt defiant rather than awkward. We were surrounded by people who wanted us to be happy. The reception was in Ramon and Teresa's backyard, decorated with string lights and mismatched tables borrowed from neighbors. Someone's uncle played guitar while Teresa's sister coordinated the food with military precision. Marcus's grandmother, who spoke no English, held my hands and said something in Spanish that Camilla translated as, "You're one of us now. We don't abandon our children for stupid reasons." The old woman's eyes were fierce when she said it, daring me to argue. I changed my name legally. Simone Barrett became Simone Reyes. It felt like shedding a skin that had never quite fit. My father had always made a point of telling people I was a Barrett of the Connecticut Barretts, like our bloodline meant something beyond old money and older prejudices. Being a Reyes meant something different. It meant acceptance without conditions, belonging without performance. My parents' silence continued through the first year of my marriage. No birthday calls, no Christmas cards, no acknowledgement that I existed. My brother Jeffrey got engaged to a woman from a suitable family, and I learned about it through social media. Valerie had a baby, and I found out from a mutual friend who mentioned it casually, assuming I already knew. The exclusion was methodical and complete. They'd erased me from the family narrative like I'd never been born. Work became complicated. I'd been employed at my father's company, Barrett Holdings, in their nonprofit division. I loved the work, connecting donors with community programs, but my father was the CEO and ultimate decision-maker. 2 months after my wedding, I was called into HR and informed my position was being eliminated due to restructuring. The HR director couldn't meet my eyes when she handed me the severance package. I signed the papers in numb silence, knowing exactly why this was happening and having no recourse to fight it. Marcus tried to make jokes about me being a kept woman, but I could see the anger simmering beneath his attempts at lightness. He worked harder, took on more projects, insisted on covering all our expenses even though my severance would have helped. His pride was both admirable and frustrating. I found new work at a different nonprofit making half my previous salary, and we adjusted. Ate out less. Canceled subscriptions. Learned to budget in ways my upbringing had never required. It was humbling and clarifying in equal measure. Month 17 of the marriage brought an unexpected development. Marcus's business landed a major contract renovating a historic building downtown. The project would take 6 months and employ most of his crew full-time. He came home with the signed contract and picked me up, spinning me around our small kitchen while laughing. "This changes everything," he said. "This is the kind of work that leads to bigger contracts. We're going to be okay. Better than okay." And the project went well until month 3 when Marcus got a call from the property owner. There'd been complaints filed with the city about permit irregularities. Nothing specific. Just enough ambiguity to require investigation and temporarily halt the work. Marcus spent 2 weeks dealing with inspectors and paperwork, proving that every permit was properly filed and approved. The delays cost him money and credibility. When the inspector finally cleared everything, he mentioned that the complaints had come from an anonymous source who seemed to have detailed knowledge of the project timeline. Marcus and I sat at our kitchen table that night, and I watched him connect the dots. His face went from confusion to realization to cold fury. "Your father did this," he said. It wasn't a question. I wanted to deny it, to believe my father wouldn't sabotage my husband's business out of spite, but I couldn't. It fit too perfectly with his pattern of punishing anyone who defied him. He'd cut me off financially. Now he was attacking Marcus's livelihood. The message was clear. Choosing me came with consequences. I called my father's office the next morning. His assistant said he was unavailable. I called his cell and it went straight to voicemail. I sent an email asking directly if he was behind the permit complaints. The email bounced back with an automated message saying his filters had blocked it. He'd programmed his system to reject anything from my address. The calculated cruelty of it took my breath away. Valerie finally answered when I called her cell. She sounded tired. "Simone, I can't be in the middle of this. Dad's made his position clear, and I have my own family to worry about. I can't risk making him angry." I asked if she knew about the permit complaints. The pause before she answered told me everything. "I don't know anything specific, but Dad mentioned that your husband's business practices might not withstand scrutiny. He said it would be unfortunate if someone looked too closely." The confirmation hit like a physical blow. My father was weaponizing his connections and resources to destroy Marcus's business. Not because Marcus had done anything wrong, but because punishing me financially hadn't been enough. He needed to demonstrate his power, to prove that defying him came with escalating costs. The pettiness of it was staggering. The danger of it was real. Marcus refused to be intimidated. He documented everything, hired a lawyer to review the complaints and his responses, made sure every future permit application was perfect. The project finished 2 months late and over budget, but it finished. The building owner was satisfied enough to provide a strong reference. Other clients appreciated Marcus's professionalism under pressure, but the damage lingered. The 2-month delay had forced him to turn down other projects. His reputation in the industry suffered whispers about reliability and complications. Year 2 of our marriage was harder. Money stayed tight. I took a second part-time job doing grant writing from home. Marcus worked 60-hour weeks trying to rebuild momentum. We were exhausted and stressed, and for the first time I understood what my mother had meant about novelty wearing off. Except it wasn't the novelty wearing off. It was fighting against sabotage and isolation while trying to build a life together. We argued more, struggled to find time for each other, felt the weight of my family's rejection in new and painful ways. Ramon and Teresa provided steady support. Sunday dinners at their house became a refuge. Teresa's cooking, Ramon's quiet wisdom, the easy affection of Marcus's extended family who gathered every week to share food and stories. His grandmother would pat my hand and say things in Spanish that I was slowly learning to understand. Los árboles fuertes crecen en tormentas. Strong trees grow in storms. I wanted to believe her. Month 23 brought a crisis. Marcus fell from scaffolding at a job site and broke his wrist and 3 ribs. The injuries weren't life-threatening, but they meant he couldn't work for 6 weeks. His crew could handle smaller jobs under his direction, but the business took a hit. I watched him struggle with being sidelined, with the pain and frustration and fear that this setback would compound the damage my father had already inflicted. His medical insurance covered most of the bills, but not all of them. We maxed out our credit card covering the gap. I swallowed my pride and called Jeffrey, told him about Marcus's accident, and asked if he could help us with a short-term loan. We'd pay him back with interest as soon as Marcus returned to work. Jeffrey was silent for a long moment before he said, "I can't do that, Simone. Dad would find out, and I can't afford to be on his bad side right now. I'm sorry, but you made your choices. You have to live with them." He hung up before I could respond. The betrayal cut deeper than my father's initial rejection. Jeffrey and I had been close growing up. He'd been the one who taught me to ride a bike, who'd helped me with math homework, who'd defended me against bullies in middle school. Now he was refusing to help when I actually needed him, because our father's approval meant more than our relationship. The transactional nature of my birth family's love became impossible to deny. We survived Marcus's recovery through a combination of savings, side work I picked up, and a loan from Ramon that he insisted wasn't a loan, but a gift. Family helps family, he said in his careful way, refusing to discuss repayment terms. Teresa brought food 3 times a week. Camilla organized a meal train with other family members. They surrounded us with practical support and never once made us feel like a burden. The contrast with my own family's abandonment was stark and clarifying. Marcus healed and returned to work with a determination that bordered on obsessive. He rebuilt his business through sheer force of will, taking jobs other contractors wouldn't touch, working harder than anyone else, proving his reliability over and over until the whispers about complications faded. Year 3 of our marriage was better financially, but the emotional toll of the previous 2 years lingered. We'd survived, but we'd been changed by the experience. I found out I was pregnant in month 38. The test showed positive on a Sunday morning, and I sat on the bathroom floor crying for 20 minutes before telling Marcus. When I finally showed him, he pulled me close and said, "This is going to be amazing. We're going to be amazing parents, better than the ones you came from." I wanted to believe him, but the fear was overwhelming. My parents had abandoned me. What if I didn't know how to be a better parent? What if their poison had infected me in ways I couldn't see? Teresa threw me a baby shower that filled her entire backyard with Marcus's extended family. Women I barely knew brought gifts and advice and stories about their own pregnancies and children. His grandmother held my growing belly and said a prayer in Spanish, blessing the baby with health and happiness. The outpouring of love from people who'd known me less than 4 years was humbling. I thought about my mother who hadn't called in 3 years, who didn't know she was going to be a grandmother, who'd chosen pride over relationship. I sent my parents a letter announcing the pregnancy, not because I expected them to care, but because I wanted documentation that I'd tried. That when this child asked why they didn't know their maternal grandparents, I could honestly say I'd made the effort and been rejected. The letter came back marked, "Return to sender," in handwriting I recognized as my mother's. She'd received it and sent it back unopened. The message was clear. I was dead to them. So was their grandchild. Valerie called 2 weeks later. "Mom's upset that you told other people about your pregnancy before telling family." I laughed, a harsh sound that surprised us both. I tried to tell her. She sent my letter back unopened. She made her choice. Valerie sighed. She didn't know what was in the envelope. She thought it was another attempt to guilt trip them about the wedding. "You should try calling." I asked why I should be the one making effort when I'd been the one cut off for loving the wrong person. Valerie had no answer. Our daughter Maya was born on a Wednesday in April. 8 pounds, 6 ounces, perfect and healthy and ours. Marcus cried when they placed her in his arms. Teresa and Ramon came to the hospital within hours. His grandmother held Maya and cried, whispering blessings in Spanish. Camilla took approximately 1,000 photos. The waiting room filled with Marcus's family celebrating this new life. My side of the family remained conspicuously absent. I made one more attempt. Sent my parents a birth announcement with Maya's photo and details. This one wasn't returned, but there was no response either. The silence continued unbroken. My daughter would grow up without knowing half her genetic family because they'd decided her father wasn't good enough. The injustice of it made me physically ill some days. Other days, I was grateful Maya would never experience their conditional love. Motherhood consumed the next year. Maya was colicky and demanding, and I loved her with a fierceness that frightened me. Marcus was a hands-on father, changing diapers at 3 a.m. and walking the floor with her when she wouldn't sleep. We were exhausted and broke and happier than we'd been since the wedding. Teresa taught me to cook traditional recipes. Ramon built Maya a crib with his own hands. The family that had embraced me continued surrounding us with practical love. Marcus's business finally turned a real profit in year 4 of our marriage. The historic building project had led to 3 more renovations. His reputation had recovered. He hired 2 more employees and rented proper office space instead of working from our apartment. We moved to a small house with a yard for Maya to play in. Nothing extravagant, but ours. Built on his work and my determination, untainted by my father's money or approval. The call came on a Saturday morning when Maya was 18 months old. An unknown number that I almost didn't answer. Valerie's voice sounded strange when I picked up. "Simone, I need you to listen without hanging up. Something's happened and Mom wants to talk to you. I asked what had happened and why she thought I'd care after 4 years of silence. Valerie's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Just please. She needs to talk to you. My mother's voice when she got on the phone was different, smaller somehow. She asked how I was, and I said fine, waiting for the real reason she'd called. She asked about Marcus and Maya. I gave minimal responses. Finally, she said, I saw Marcus's parents last week at a charity gala. They were presenting a check to a children's hospital, a substantial check. Ramon apparently sits on the hospital board and has been a major donor for years. Teresa runs a foundation that provides meals to food-insecure families. They were receiving an award for their community service. The words came out stilted, like she was reading from a script she hadn't written. I felt something cold settle in my chest. So you're calling because you realized Ramon and Teresa Reyes are philanthropists? That they're the kind of people you consider respectable? Is that what it takes for you to acknowledge I exist? My mother tried to interrupt, but I kept going. You cut me off because you thought Marcus came from nothing, because you assumed his family was beneath yours. Now you find out they give away more money than you spend on country club fees, and suddenly I'm worth talking to again? My mother's voice turned defensive. We didn't know. If you'd told us about his parents' background, things might have been different. The statement was so absurd I started laughing. His parents' background? You mean the fact that Ramon immigrated at 23 with $500 and built a successful business through 40 years of hard work? Or that Teresa came from a family that lost everything and rebuilt it? You mean those backgrounds? The ones you never bothered to learn about because you were too busy being embarrassed by Marcus working with his hands? She said my father wanted to meet with us, that they'd made a mistake and wanted to repair the relationship. I asked what had changed in 4 years besides her social embarrassment at discovering Ramon and Teresa's charitable work. She couldn't give me an answer that didn't sound calculated and hollow. I told her I needed time to process and hung up, sat on my couch staring at nothing while Maya played with blocks at my feet, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shaken my world. Marcus came home from a hardware store run and found me still sitting there. When I explained the call, his face went through several emotions before settling on a hard skepticism. So they want back in now that they know my parents aren't who they thought they were. Now that they've realized cutting you off might have been a miscalculation. He said miscalculation like it was profanity. I nodded, unable to trust my voice. We talked for hours after Maya went to bed, worked through anger and hurt, and the complicated desire to have my family back even knowing they didn't deserve it. Marcus was clear about his boundaries. If we do this, if we open that door, it's on our terms. They apologize to both of us. They acknowledge what they did was wrong. They meet my parents properly and treat them with respect. And if they slip even once, we walk away and don't look back. I agreed, but privately wondered if my parents were capable of genuine apology or if this was just another manipulation. I called my mother back 3 days later, told her Marcus and I would meet with them, but there were conditions. She agreed too quickly without asking what the conditions were, and I knew this was about managing their social embarrassment more than actually repairing relationships. We arranged to meet at a neutral restaurant the following Sunday. My stomach churned with anxiety all week. Sunday arrived cold and gray. Marcus wore a suit he'd bought specifically for this meeting, refusing to give my parents ammunition to judge his appearance. We arrived 5 minutes early, and they were already there, seated at a corner table. My father had aged in 4 years, new lines around his eyes and mouth. My mother looked brittle in a way I didn't remember. Valerie was there too, apparently serving as buffer or witness. The first 10 minutes were excruciating small talk. My father asked about Maya using the tone people use when they're checking a box on a list. My mother commented on the restaurant's decor. Valerie stared at her water glass like it might provide escape. Finally, Marcus cleared his throat and said, "Let's address why we're really here. You cut Simone off for marrying me. Now you want back in? What changed?" My father bristled at the directness. I think we all made mistakes. Emotions were high. Things were said in the heat of the moment that we all regret. Marcus leaned forward slightly. I didn't make any mistakes. I fell in love with your daughter and married her. You're the ones who turned that into a crisis. So I'll ask again, what changed? The silence stretched until my mother said quietly, "We met your parents properly. At the gala, they're not what we expected." I felt Marcus go very still beside me. What were you expecting? Poor immigrants who didn't speak English? People you could look down on to justify cutting off your daughter? My mother flinched, but my father's face reddened. Now, wait just a minute. We had certain concerns about Simone's future financial security. Concerns that appear to have been unfounded. We're trying to make amends here. Marcus stood up. Making amends requires admitting you were wrong, apologizing, showing remorse for the damage you caused. This isn't amends. This is damage control because you're embarrassed you misjudged us. He looked at me. We don't need people in our lives who only value us when they think we're worth something. Maya deserves better than grandparents who'd abandon her mother over class prejudice. We're leaving. I stood too, my heart pounding. Valerie looked panicked. Simone, wait, they're trying. This is a start. I looked at my sister who'd stood by while our parents erased me from the family. A start would have been them showing up 4 years ago. A start would have been meeting Maya in the hospital. This isn't a start. It's too little, too late, and for all the wrong reasons. We walked out while my mother called after us, her voice sharp with distress she didn't know how to hide. In the parking lot, Marcus was shaking with adrenaline. I'm sorry. I know you wanted to try, but I couldn't sit there and let them pretend this was about anything other than their social standing. I hugged him, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Don't apologize. You said everything I couldn't say, everything I needed them to hear. We drove home and told Teresa and Ramon what had happened. They listened without judgment, and Teresa said simply, "Some people only love what makes them look good. That's not love at all." My father called the next day, left a voicemail that I listened to twice, analyzing every word. He wanted another chance, said they'd gotten off on the wrong foot and could we please meet again, this time at their house where they'd be more comfortable. The presumption that their comfort mattered more than accountability made me delete the message halfway through. I didn't call back. Valerie showed up at my house 3 days later without calling first. I opened the door to find her standing on my porch looking miserable. "Can we talk?" I let her in and made tea while she sat at my kitchen table. Maya was napping upstairs. The house was quiet except for the kettle's whistle. Valerie wrapped her hands around her mug and said, "I've been a coward. I watched them treat you like garbage and said nothing because I was scared. I chose my trust fund and Dad's approval over my sister. I'm sorry." The apology hit differently than my parents' attempted reconciliation. Valerie's voice shook with genuine remorse. Her eyes were red like she'd been crying before she arrived. I sat across from her and asked, "Why now? What changed for you?" She shook her head. "Watching you walk out of that restaurant. You were so strong, so clear about what you deserved. I realized I've been weak my entire life. I've let Dad control everything because it's easier than standing up to him. But it's cost me you, and it's cost Maya a relationship with her aunt." We talked for 2 hours. She told me about life in the family after I left, how Jeffrey had become more rigid, trying to be the perfect son to fill the gap I'd left, how my parents spoke about me in clinical terms, like I was a problem they'd solved by cutting me loose, how holidays felt hollow with my absence. She cried when she talked about watching Maya through social media posts from mutual friends, knowing she'd missed the first 18 months of her niece's life because she'd been too afraid to defy our parents. I asked what she wanted now, and she said honestly, "I want my sister back. I want to know Maya. I want to stop being the person who chose money and approval over love. I know I don't deserve it after standing by for 4 years, but I'm asking anyway." I looked at this woman who'd been my closest friend growing up, who'd abandoned me when I needed her, who was now asking for a chance I wasn't sure I could give. Maya started crying upstairs. I went to get her, and when I came back down with my daughter on my hip, Valerie's face crumpled. "She looks like you did at that age." I let Valerie hold Maya, watched my sister's careful gentleness with this niece she was meeting for the first time. Maya studied Valerie with the serious suspicion toddlers have for strangers, but didn't cry. After a few minutes, she reached for Valerie's necklace and Valerie laughed, a sound I hadn't heard in years. I told her, "If you want back in, it has to be real. You can't disappear again if Dad gets angry. You can't choose their approval over showing up for Maya. She deserves better than conditional family." Valerie nodded, still holding Maya. "I understand. I'll prove I'm serious, however long it takes." She started coming over every Sunday afternoon. At first, I watched her carefully, waiting for signs she'd retreat to the safety of our parents' approval. But she kept showing up, brought age-appropriate toys, learned Maya's schedule and preferences, asked about my life with genuine interest. Slowly, cautiously, we rebuilt trust. My parents' attempts to reconnect continued. My father sent flowers with a card that said, "Family forgives." I sent them back with a note that said, "Family doesn't abandon." My mother called repeatedly until I blocked her number. They showed up at Ramon and Teresa's restaurant one evening, apparently hoping to run into us, but Ramon politely informed them we weren't there and they weren't welcome to wait. The attempted manipulation through various channels was exhausting. Jeffrey called after 6 weeks of radio silence from me. He said our parents were hurt and confused by my refusal to reconcile, that they'd made a genuine effort and I was being stubborn. I asked if he remembered refusing to loan me money when Marcus was injured. The silence on his end was long. Finally, he said, "That was different. Dad had made his position clear." I told him that was exactly the problem. Our parents' positions had always mattered more than relationships, and I was done living under that conditional love. Marcus's business continued growing. He landed a contract for a new medical building that would take 8 months and employ 15 people. The irony wasn't lost on us. My father had tried to sabotage Marcus's career and instead had forced him to become more careful, more professional, more determined. The obstacles had made him stronger. Marcus hired a business manager and a proper accountant, moved into a larger office, started turning down smaller jobs to focus on substantial projects. Success felt sweeter because we'd earned it despite the sabotage, not because of family connections. Year 5 of our marriage brought unexpected developments. Ramon had a health scare that landed him in the hospital for a week. Marcus and I visited daily, along with what felt like his entire extended family. The waiting room was always full of Rhea's relatives bringing food, telling stories. supporting Teresa through her worry. My parents never visited anyone in the hospital unless it was socially required. The contrast in how these two families operated couldn't have been clearer. Ramon recovered and threw himself back into his charitable work with renewed intensity. Teresa joked that she'd created a monster, but her eyes were proud. I learned more about their history through those weeks. How Ramon had worked 3 jobs while building his business. How Teresa had started cooking for elderly neighbors and turned it into a foundation that now served thousands. How they'd given back to the community that had given them opportunity. Their wealth was substantial, but they wore it quietly, focused on impact over image. My mother showed up at my house unannounced one Saturday morning. Marcus was at a job site. Maya and I were making pancakes when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and there she was, perfectly dressed and carefully made up, looking profoundly uncomfortable. "I need to talk to you," she said. I almost closed the door, but something in her face stopped me. I let her in, but didn't offer coffee or comfort. She sat at my kitchen table while Maya ate pancakes with intense concentration, getting syrup everywhere. My mother watched her granddaughter with an expression I couldn't read. Finally, she said, "I've been going to therapy. Your father doesn't know. I've been working through some things about my own parents and how they raised me, about class and value and what I was taught to prioritize." She paused, watching Maya try to use her fork properly. "I was taught that certain people mattered and others didn't, that appearances and social standing were more important than character. I taught you the same things." I waited, not willing to make this easier for her. She continued, "I met Marcus's parents properly last month, had lunch with Teresa at her foundation. She showed me what they do, the families they help, the lives they've changed. And I realized I'd been so focused on what Ramon and Teresa looked like on paper that I never saw who they actually were, never bothered to learn. And I did the same thing to Marcus, judged him based on assumptions and prejudices without ever giving him a chance." And Maya finished her pancakes and climbed down from her chair, wandering over to her toy box. My mother watched her move and said, "She's beautiful. I've missed so much." Her voice cracked on the last word. I said, "Yes, you have. By choice." She nodded, tears sliding down her carefully made-up face. I know it was my choice. Your father's choice. And we were wrong. I'm not here to make excuses. I'm here to say, I'm sorry for cutting you off, for making you choose, for missing these years with you and Maya, for teaching you that love was conditional when it should have been absolute. The apology was more than I'd expected, but I wasn't ready to accept it. What about Dad? Is he sorry too, or is this just you trying to clean up the mess on your own? She wiped her face, careful not to smear her makeup. Your father is complicated. He's struggling with admitting he was wrong. His pride is involved, but he's seen the photos from the hospital gala, seen Ramon and Teresa's foundation work featured in the business journal. It's forced him to reconsider some assumptions. I laughed bitterly. So he's sorry because your social circle now respects Marcus's family, not because cutting off his daughter was cruel, just because it was bad judgment that made him look foolish. My mother flinched but didn't argue. That's part of it. I won't lie to you. Your father cares deeply about appearances and reputation. But there's also been guilt, especially when he learned you'd tried to reach out when Maya was born and we rejected it. That's bothered him more than he'll admit. I asked what she wanted from this conversation. She looked at Maya playing with blocks on the floor. I want to know my granddaughter. I want to repair what I broke with you. I want to be better than I was raised to be. I don't expect you to forgive me immediately, but I'm asking for a chance to prove I've changed. I told her I needed time to think and discuss it with Marcus. She accepted that. Asked if she could hug Maya goodbye. I said no, that Maya didn't know her and I wouldn't confuse her with strangers making claims about being family. My mother looked hurt but nodded and left without arguing. After she was gone, I sat on the floor with my daughter and cried while she patted my face, trying to comfort me in the way toddlers do when they sense distress. Marcus came home to find me still on the floor, Maya napping against my shoulder. I told him about my mother's visit and watched him process the information. His first instinct was to protect. To say no, they'd had their chance and wasted it. But after a long pause, he said, "It's your family, your decision. I'll support whatever you choose. But I need to know they won't hurt you again, that they won't hurt Maya. If we open this door, they have to respect our boundaries completely." Valerie came over that evening and I told her about our mother's visit. She wasn't surprised. Mom's been different lately, more reflective, less concerned with what other people think. I don't know if it's the therapy or age or genuine remorse. Maybe all three. I asked if Dad was changing too. Valerie shook her head. Dad's still Dad. He's trying to understand why his money and connections didn't fix this, but I don't think he fully grasps what he did wrong beyond miscalculating Marcus's family's standing. We decided to meet with both my parents, but this time at Ramon and Teresa's house, on our territory with our support system present. The symbolism wasn't subtle, but it mattered. My parents would have to come into a space that represented the family they'd rejected, would have to interact with Ramon and Teresa as equals, not as charity cases or social climbing opportunities. The meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday afternoon. That week felt interminable. I practiced what I wanted to say. Marcus prepared himself for potential confrontation. Teresa cooked enough food to feed 20 people, even though only 8 would be there. Ramon made sure his English was sharp, refusing to give my father any excuse to dismiss him. The tension in everyone's preparation was palpable. Sunday arrived sunny and warm. My parents pulled up exactly on time, my father's expression carefully neutral, my mother visibly nervous. Teresa welcomed them at the door with graciousness that put me to shame. She offered refreshments, showed them to the living room, made small talk about the weather. Ramon shook my father's hand firmly, not deferential, but not aggressive. They established themselves as hosts, not supplicants. We all sat in Ramon and Teresa's comfortable living room, surrounded by family photos and evidence of a life well lived. My father looked around with an expression that might have been appreciation or assessment. My mother focused on Maya, who was playing with blocks in the corner, supervised by Camilla. The silence stretched until Marcus said, "We're here to establish ground rules. If you want back into Simone and Maya's lives, here's what that looks like." He outlined our terms. Complete apology with acknowledgement of specific harms. Respect for both families equally, with no hierarchy implied. No financial strings attached to relationships. No interference in how we raise Maya. Weekly therapy sessions for my father addressing his classism and controlling behaviors. My father's face darkened with each point. When Marcus finished, my father said, "These seem excessive. We're willing to admit mistakes were made on both sides." Ramon spoke for the first time, his accent careful but his words clear. "No mistakes on both sides. Only one side made mistakes. My son married your daughter with love and respect. You responded with rejection and cruelty. That is all." The room went silent. My father stared at Ramon like he'd been slapped. Ramon continued, "You want now to repair because you learn we are successful. But we were successful before. You did not care to know. You judged without knowing. That is your failure." Teresa added, "In our culture, family is everything. We would never abandon a child for choosing love. This is not normal. This is not acceptable. If you want to be part of Maya's life, you must understand you failed your daughter. Failed her completely. And you must do better." My mother was crying quietly. My father's jaw worked like he was grinding his teeth. Jeffrey and Valerie, who'd come as witnesses, looked uncomfortable. I found my voice. "Everything Marcus listed isn't negotiable. Those are the minimum requirements for access to my family. You'll apologize specifically for cutting me off, for sabotaging Marcus's business, for returning my letters unopened, for missing Maya's birth. You'll acknowledge you were wrong without qualifications or excuses. You'll respect Ramon and Teresa as equals, not judge them based on nationality or language or anything else. And you'll prove through consistent actions over months that you've changed. One slip, one condescending comment, one attempt at control, and we're done. Permanently." My father stood up. "I won't be dictated to by my own daughter, or lectured by people who don't understand our family dynamics." He headed for the door. My mother stood too, but didn't follow him. She looked at me and said, "I accept your terms. All of them. I'll do the work. I'll earn my way back." She looked at my father. "With or without you." The shock on his face was almost comical. In 40 years of marriage, she'd apparently never contradicted him publicly. My father stared at her like he didn't recognize her. "Eleanor, we're leaving." She shook her head. "No, you're leaving. I'm staying. I'm meeting my granddaughter properly. I'm apologizing to my daughter and her husband. I'm learning to be better than I was raised to be. You can join me or not, but I'm done choosing your pride over our children." The transformation in her posture was visible. She'd been brittle when she arrived. Now she stood taller, more solid. My father looked around the room at all of us watching him. At Ramon and Teresa, who'd held firm boundaries. At Marcus, who hadn't backed down. At me, his daughter, who'd survived 4 years without him and built a life that didn't need his approval or money. At my mother, his wife, choosing our relationship over his pride. He stood there for a long moment before sitting back down heavily. "What exactly do you want me to say?" The next 3 hours were painful and necessary. My father struggled to apologize without defending himself. My mother cried through her apology but didn't make excuses. Marcus shared how the sabotage had affected his business and his sense of safety. I talked about the isolation and grief of being cut off. Ramon and Teresa offered perspective from their own experiences with family betrayal and forgiveness. Maya played through most of it, occasionally coming over to check on me, sensing the emotional intensity. By the end, my parents had agreed to family therapy together, and individual therapy for my father. They'd acknowledged specific harms and apologized without qualification. They'd committed to proving through actions they'd changed. My mother asked if she could hold Maya. I said yes, watching my daughter go carefully into her grandmother's arms. Maya studied my mother's face seriously before patting her cheek, a gesture of comfort she'd learned from me. My mother broke down completely. The weeks that followed were tentative. My parents came to Sunday dinners at Ramon and Teresa's house, fitting into the established routine rather than demanding separate accommodation. My father was stiff at first, uncomfortable with the casual warmth and multilingual chaos of Marcus's extended family, but he showed up, listened more than he talked, watched how Ramon and Teresa interacted with their children and grandchildren with evident affection and no conditions. My mother took to Maya with a gentleness that surprised me. She asked permission before giving gifts, respected bedtimes and routines, accepted correction when she overstepped. She attended therapy faithfully and shared insights she was learning about her own upbringing and the prejudices she'd internalized. Slowly, very slowly, I began to trust that the change was real. Jeffrey remained distant, loyal to the family structure that benefited him, but Valerie integrated fully into our lives, becoming the Aunt Maya deserved. She brought her own daughter to play dates and family dinners, raising her child differently than we'd been raised, building something better from the wreckage of our family patterns. A year after the confrontation in Ramon and Teresa's living room, my father pulled me aside at a Sunday dinner. We stood in the backyard while kids played and adults talked inside. He looked older, tired, but somehow more real. I was wrong, he said. Not just about Marcus or his family, about everything. About measuring people's worth by their bank accounts and family names, about treating love like a transaction that required approval, about cutting you off when you made a choice I didn't understand. I waited for the caveat, the justification, but none came. He continued, I missed 4 years of your life, Maya's early years. I can never get that back. And it was my fault, not yours, not Marcus's, mine. His voice broke slightly. I'm grateful you gave me another chance. More grateful than I know how to express. I'm trying to be better, to be the father you deserved all along. I hugged him then, the first physical contact we'd had in 5 years. He held on tightly, and I felt him shaking with either emotion or relief. Marcus's business grew into one of the most respected contracting firms in the city. My father, trying to make amends, recommended Marcus for projects through his business connections, but always disclosed the relationship and let Marcus's work speak for itself. Marcus appreciated the referrals but never relied on them, maintaining the independence that defined his success. Maya grew up surrounded by 2 families who loved her completely. She learned Spanish from Ramon and Teresa, practical skills from Marcus, compassion from watching her grandmother's transformation. She never knew a time when her maternal grandparents weren't present, but she grew up hearing the story of how family can be lost and rebuilt through accountability and change. Years later, at Maya's 8th birthday party, I watched my father talking with Ramon, 2 men who'd started as adversaries now friends through the bridge their children had built. My mother played with Maya, truly present in a way she'd never been with me as a child. Valerie's daughter and Maya ran through the yard like sisters. Marcus stood with his crew, men who'd become loyal employees because he treated them with dignity and paid them fairly. Teresa came to stand beside me, watching the celebration. You did good, she said in her careful English. You stood strong when it was hard. You demanded respect. You built something beautiful from something broken. I leaned into her, this woman who'd accepted me when my own mother had rejected me. We all did, I said. All of us together. She squeezed my hand. Yes, all of us. That's what family means. The past couldn't be undone. The 4 years of abandonment and pain would always be part of our story. But we'd built something better on the other side. A family that valued character over connections. That measured worth by kindness rather than bank accounts. That understood belonging was earned through presence and respect, not demanded through obligation or blood. My parents had learned too late that the family they rejected was exactly the family they needed, and we'd learned that sometimes the greatest strength is knowing what you deserve and refusing to settle for less. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.